Hi guys, welcome to Wednesday's lecture, and today we're going to be talking about what is government. This week we've been doing basically big questions about government, like why do we have government, where does government come from, and of course, what is government, why do we need government, why is government important? Hopefully you've done the shipwrecked activity before you've taken a look at this lecture, because it will really relate to some of the things we're talking about here in just a minute. So, without further ado, on a little fun note, I know you online students have not been in my classroom. In case you're curious, I can give you a tour. Maybe you can see behind me. There's a big American flag back there and some desks. And if you look up here, I got some stuff over there, and that's pretty much it on a fun note. But okay, back to the main question of why we're here today. What is government? Make sure you have a piece of paper out to take some notes. Luckily, since this is recorded, you can watch it anytime and take notes as we go. So, here we go. So where does all this government stuff come from, right? I mean, government is old. I mean, really old. And people have been debating what kind of government we should have and what kind of government is best for people and society for 2,000 years. I mean, government is certainly not new. I mean, if I've read some stuff by ancient Greeks having a conversation 2,500 years ago, where they literally debate, what's best, democracy, oligarchy, a king, and they talk about the benefits and disadvantages to both. Let's skip this here. All right. So before we talk about government, let's talk about common characteristics of a nation and a state. Some key terminology I think is important to know going forward. First of all, we live in America. America is a nation and a state. And yes, I know that sounds confusing because really America is a union of 50 states and is itself a nation. So there are 4 common characteristics that define a nation or a state that all countries have. Germany, France, China, Brazil, you name it, they've got it. And these are the 4. First of all, they have a population or people. People of a country may be similar or different in language, race, customs, homogeneous. Maybe they worship the same religion, or they speak the same language, or they eat the same food. There's a people that define that nation. There's a territory, right? So a boundary that separates one state from another. People in Canada might not seem that different, but they eat funny things like poutine and play more hockey, and we're separated from them by our border. And if you drive an hour or 2 up to Detroit and cross the border, you can too be in Canada. Sovereignty, so political authority to rule itself, all right? As a nation and a state in a territory with a people, we govern ourselves. Canada governs itself with its parliament. We govern ourselves with our Congress, right? We have the right to say whether or not we own guns or don't own guns, whether healthcare is free or it costs money, whether going to school is required or not required. We have the political authority to rule and govern ourselves, decide how we act with other nations, whether we go to war, whether we're at peace, whether we trade with one country and not another. And we, of course, protect its boundaries and its people. And we will talk about this much more in detail in the future. But if anything, the number one role of a government is to protect the people in it. That's the whole reason armies exist. That's why governments establish police forces and firefighters and ambulance systems in order to provide a basic level of protection for the people. And, of course, last but not least, a nation or a state has a government. People with power who need to have authority to make official decisions, and the people must accept this. All nations and states that do exist have some form of government in one way or another. And we'll talk about some of those different forms today, such as kings and dictators and monarchs and democracies and republics, just like we have here. Funny pictures. Ooh, who doesn't love pictures? Now, people believe that governments come from different places, and there are theories and origins as to how and why governments exist. And we can talk about which ones you feel are right, but let's talk about the 4 theories of government. The first theory is the force theory. This says that the state or the nation and its four common characteristics that we just got done discussing was born from taking control. Military force creates the nation. One or a few claim control of an area. Once they had control, the four characteristics fell into place. The four characteristics, of course, the ones we just discussed: a people, a government, sovereignty, and territory. Examples of maybe the force theory in play are, say, like dictatorships, like Hitler or Stalin or Mussolini, that you learn about in previous history courses, who took power and created a nation through often force. So, the evolution theory. I also promise you, none of these pictures of people have anything to do with me. The evolution theory, developed out of the household, or out of the family, head of the household. Clans become tribes. When a man began an agricultural life, the state began. So basically, this theory is just about as old as man itself. So basically, once man started farming like 5,000-6,000 years ago and settled down into one area and developed a town or a village or a community, he developed government. He created laws. He created rules. His clan becomes a tribe, so to speak. The divine right theory. God created the state. God picked the ruler, usually of royal birth. So kings and queens for thousands of years claimed that their lineage and their line was chosen by God, and that to defy the ruler was literally a sin. And this is not just Christianity, this is Islam, this is Hinduism, this is all sorts of religions that believe that the right to rule is divinely ordained upon a particular person. It was widely even accepted in most areas until 100 years ago. About 100 years ago, this isn't quite true now. When I first started teaching, I could say 100 years ago, but 100 years ago, most governments were kings and queens. In America, democracy and republic was really an exception to the rule. So, next we have the social contract. All right, now this is the origin theory of the United States itself. So this is developed from Enlightenment philosophers. Hopefully you learned about the Enlightenment in world history. Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu, these are three big people that have a huge role on American government and the ideas that some of our founding fathers espoused, such as Thomas Jefferson. Now, no government existed and no person was subject to any superior power until people come together. People agree with each other to create a state. They come to an agreement. Government is created to promote safety and well-being of its citizens. Some rights are given up voluntarily. So, right, you give up a few rights to the government and they protect you, say with police, and they prevent things like theft and robbery and crimes. Sorry for that. And basically, government is created to promote safety. As I mentioned, the number one role of government is to promote the safety and well-being of its citizens, right? That is the role of government. That's why we have armies and police officers and firefighters. And this helps shape the concepts of democracy. We came together here as Americans and literally created a government. We're going to talk about something later on in this course called the Constitutional Convention in 1788, where Americans from the states that existed at that time came together and literally wrote the rules for how our government functions. And the Constitution will be a big part of this class. In many ways, you could say the Constitution of the United States, the document, the rule book of our government, is this class. It is that important. So, these are the four origin theories, and a question you should be thinking about as we go along, and you'll have a chance to respond to this in the discussion board later, is which one do you believe to be true, and why? Which one makes the most sense to you? So, what is an institution? A few more general informations and vocabulary, and this is important. Government is an institution, an enduring cultural structure that meets a basic need of society and provides social control. All right? So it meets basic needs. We're talking protection. It provides you with life, as our Declaration of Independence says it should. It also provides you with, some freedoms, right? You have the choice to decide what job you want. You have the choice to decide where you live, roughly speaking, or what you believe, religiously particularly, or how you spend your money. Nobody's telling you how to do that, right? So they provide you with some basic controls over your life. But government's also established to maintain social order and security. We have laws, like laws that tell you how to drive, or laws that that say you can't work on this day, or laws that say you can't do this or can't do that, because we as a society believe this is right or that is wrong. And some of them are obvious. Some of it could be as obvious as murder is bad. And everybody would agree with that. Murder is terrible. We should have a law. No more murder. Same with robbery and theft and embezzlement and crimes, or like stealing someone's property. Like, we can all agree that there should be laws for these things. But then some of them are not as clear-cut and maybe controversial. I mean, it's hard to talk about government without talking about controversial issues, about religion, marriage. There are laws and rules about all of these things in every country, nation, or state that has ever and will ever exist. Some other things. Public policy, a term we'll use in this class a lot, as anything the government decides to do. The policy of the government. Public policy. And every government really has three kinds of power. And particularly in a republic or a democracy like ours, that boils down to legislative power, or our United States Congress, our elected representatives, who make the laws. They write the laws. And the executive power, who enforces the laws, right? So this is the President of the United States. He enforces the laws passed by our legislative branch. And last but not least, judicial power, which interprets the laws. And in our country, that's the Constitution, right? The rule book, that important document we're going to talk about in the future. And this is the court system. So the Supreme Court, the local court, the appellate court, all the courts are interpreting the laws and the Constitution of our country and deciding what they mean and how they apply to every individual case that comes before them. A difficult and complicated task, which we'll talk about more throughout the duration of our course this year. So, government is necessary. But why? Why is government necessary? Right? Think about this. It's not too hard. Think about some of the things I've already mentioned. Why is government necessary? I imagine some of you, at the beginning of this week, when you answered our questions from the slide on Monday, and you were describing American government, or what you thought about government, you probably said some negative things. It's understandable. I might say some negative things. But government is still necessary. Government is not inherently evil. The people that may be in it may be good or evil, depending on your interpretation. But government is necessary. Absolutely must have it. Cannot have it, not have it. So, why is government necessary? And don't worry, you're going to answer this question directly in just a minute. Anyways, that's all I have to talk to you about in this lecture. If you guys have any questions or want to know more about origin theories or the breakdown of government as an institution or the four main characteristics we talked about, please feel free to ask me. And also, when you're thinking about is government necessary, think back to the shipwreck activity. What laws did you have to make? Was it easy to make? Could your island have survived without these laws? Is government necessary? And I'm going to leave you with that.